Okay, well, thank you, Pedro Lopes. I'm pronouncing that.
That's
somewhat
perfectly
correctly.
fine. Yeah.
Spanish is actually my first language.
But it's Portuguese.
Oh no.
Lopes with an S. That's the secret. That's the secret. You do Z for Spanish, S for Portuguese.
That's a bad starting spot.
No. It's perfectly fine. You're not the first one. You won't be the last.
Okay, so another pronunciation issue. Is it QuEra, QuEra?
Officially, we say QuEra.
QuEra.
Yeah, we just
Okay,
say QuEra.
that's good to know. So, can you tell us what is QuEra and like how does it come into the quantum landscape?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
What is QuEra? What's your
Oh, I see.
where you go?
So we are a quantum computing company. We're based in Boston. We have been founded in kind of early 2019. That's when we started operating. So we're about 6 years old, more or less. And we make neutral atom quantum computers, right? So these are quantum computers. I guess we'll talk about the tech soon enough. But we make those machines, and we both do the R&D to develop the next generations of those machines, looking for kind of fully fault-tolerant quantum computing, which we can also talk about what that means. I know that there's always a lot to unpack whenever we're talking quantum computing.
Yeah.
We also work on the design of applications and the software stack to control those machines and make them kind of co-design between the applications and the algorithms and the hardware itself, so that we can kind of make them useful and powerful as early as possible. Right? So it's a very kind of a holistic approach to quantum computing.
Okay, great. That was better than I was hoping for. It's a good canned speech for what QuEra does. Let's take a step back though first. How did you get to QuEra? Like, what's your roadmap as a physicist or scientist? How did you get there?
So my path, my professional trajectory is complex. Complex. It's definitely non-linear, and I think that maybe that might serve as inspiration for some people. It's not always that we have linear trajectories, professional trajectories in life. And in my case, I'm a physicist by training. I worked was following the standard academic path. I worked as a postdoc researcher in Canada for a few years. And at some point, I was feeling...
Sorry, in quantum computing?
It was not quantum computing. It was quantum materials. So I'm a theorist working on quantum materials.
Stuff.
Not only simulation, it was more like a design of devices and new physics. I was looking for what we call fractionalization, so developing systems where the kind of constituents of it, like let's say an electron, behaves like as parts of an electron only. Maybe it's just the magnetic moment, or just the charge, and you separate those things apart. It's something that doesn't exist naturally in nature, but you have to make them
like the charge goes one way and the spin goes the other way.
That's right. And maybe you break the spin, you break the magnetic moment into something smaller, and make these things that sometimes you'll hear called anyons. So that's what I was studying in my PhD.
Sure.
And then so from that I moved to Canada as a researcher, first in Quebec for a couple of years, and then in the West Coast in British Columbia. And at some point in this trajectory, I started to feel that the managing science is a very complex process, and I see a lot of complaint about it, but I don't see many scientists saying, okay, I will put aside the science for a while, and I'm going to try to learn how to coordinate scientists and get the heavy loads, the administrative loads out of the way, so that the scientists can do their work best, right? So I wanted to try that for a while, and that's what I was doing. So I moved out of science, pure research, to become a program manager. I spent a couple of years doing that. Then family reasons brought me to Boston, and at that time QuEra was about a couple of years old, a little less. And they were not looking for someone to manage science necessarily, but they were looking for someone to do business. And I was like, you know what, this sounds like an interesting next adventure and something to learn, and I think that I can apply the things that I've done before in a way that is aware of what is the technology, aware of what quantum computing has always a big challenge, particularly on the marketing side. I guess in this conference here, we were just hearing in the morning people talk about the importance of balancing the messaging, right? Like you have to control the hype, but you have to be optimistic, and you have to be precise for the scientists, but very exciting for the investors, and have to balance all those expectations together. It feels very much like the balancing of expectations of science management that I saw before. So I moved to QuEra, and I was working in the business team, spent a couple of years doing that, so that evolved into a position of quantum advocacy. So working very closely, particularly with policymakers and government institutions, national labs.
So like a step below a lobbyist, kind of.
Well, not so much. It's closer to the national labs and forming strategic partnerships.
I see.
Right,
Yeah.
forming strategic partnerships in this kind of research space, right? Like I'm trying to figure out how QuEra could best help deliver on the national priorities, right? And align the work of the company with the ecosystem that we live in, right? And then I worked very close on many events for workforce development in that process. And then recently I moved to become the head of our education efforts, so the technical lead of that, and went back to doing science. So I actually closed the loop in a very non-linear way to go back to doing science and education in a mix.
So off that talking point, so do you have a canned, speech for when your family members ask you what is quantum computing and why should we care?
That's an interesting question, in my opinion. I don't think that I have a canned speech for that. I think that the way that I tend to describe this is that computing is a process of getting from point A to point B. You have input and output, right? So where your starting point and your ending point. And in this case, it's like in computation, usually we're talking about something that involves manipulation of numbers, data, quantities, right? And the way that you can go from point A to point B is like a little road with rules for how you can drive or bike or whatever it is your favorite means of transportation.
Yeah.
And so sometimes people think that quantum computing is about computing fast and going fast, and it's not. It's about changing the rules of the road. Sometimes it's changing the road itself, right? So I have a logic that relies on these laws of quantum mechanics that are, at the end of the day, very much like just a little arrows pointing around, and like instead of kind of discretely having just two options between 0 and 1, you have arrows that can point in arbitrary directions with projections, with like a little shadow in different components that then comes in probability, etc., etc. So the rules are different, right? There's probability, there is direction, there is geometry, there is space. So with the rules being different, so come opportunities, right? And people have found out that by playing with those arrows and playing with that geometry of space and information, sometimes you can get from point A to point B faster. It's not faster, it's just that the road used to be in zigzag and now the road is straight, right? Like
that makes sense. Yeah.
So when I am explaining quantum computing in a casual way, right? That's the path that I tend to take, right? It's all about changing rules, and in having new rules, being creative enough to use those new rules to get more efficiently. Efficiency doesn't need to be time; it can be many other things.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So, what would you say about QuEra that I guess gives them an advantage over other quantum technologies, ion, photon, NMR?
I think that quantum technologies, they are all the first statement is everything has been moving really fast. It doesn't matter which technology, they have all been advancing extremely fast, right? I remember what this field was 5 years ago. The conversations were extremely different from what they are today. The conversations were very different 1 year ago. right? So the derivative, the rate of change.
Can you give us an example?
We were not talking about quantum error correction in our everyday lives.
Okay.
For the majority of the community, there was the quantum error correction community existed, but it felt like, okay, we know we are gonna need this. We are nowhere near ready to implement this.
That's like once you've got everything going and you're trying to solve a real world problem.
Well, the challenge is that, or the point is that when you see error correction happening is when the speed of your capacity to solve problems cranks up.
Yeah.
Right. And nowadays we are seeing early demonstrations of it. Right. So something that sounded like something that you don't need to worry about it. You can leave it to your mathematician friends to worry about solving those until it's time. Now it's like everyday life. Every day on my day job at the company, I'm gonna be talking about something related to error correction to someone.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a tremendous change of perspective, given a space that's talk a lot about NISC, noise intermediate scale quantum computing, analog quantum computing. Those were things that were the bread and butter, the everyday topics 2 years ago, and now suddenly boom, error correction. That's it. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that. Given the speed of this high speed of change, every technology is kind of breaking their own ceilings in different ways. And one thing that I like about neutral atom quantum tech is that I feel like we are in a stage where we have very balanced capabilities in comparison with all the other techs. Right, superconducting systems, they might have like some good controllability of the qubits and good scale relative to ion traps. Ions are, most ion traps today, they are more or less linear. Maybe there's some new models that are starting to change that. But they have fewer qubits, but they have much better quality. The fidelities of those qubits are super high, right? And they have this long-distance connectivity that is also super helpful to make efficient use of your quantum resource. Right? Quantum coherence is a limited commodity, as a friend of mine used to say. Right? So you don't want to waste. You don't want to waste like a grain of quantum coherence, if I can think of that, because that's going to be the difference between getting nonsense out of your computer or getting something that you can make sense out of it. So neutral atom tech lives kind of in the good average of all of that. We have very large system sizes because the atoms, they are all equal, right? So we are using. How does the tech work? Right? Just briefly, right? We have a little source of rubidium in our case. We heat it up, it's gonna spit a cloud, and then we're gonna pierce that cloud by some laser beam that has been patterned into a shape. Let's say a square lattice of beams. And those beams, as I like to say, laser is not like lightsaber. Lightsaber is straight, but the laser has a waist. Right? The waist is usually called the focal point, and the focal point is sticky to those atoms. So we hold those atoms with those focalized laser one by one. Those are called laser tweezers. Now those atoms, they come as they come from nature, so they are all equal. There's no need for you to worry about your fabrication processes because they are all equal. They are what they are.
Weird question. How many atoms per point is there? Is there just one atom per point? Is it like a small?
What do you mean by point?
Like per localization focal point area.
Oh, it's one. Usually it's 0 or 1.
Okay.
So that's something that is interesting is that you load those tweezers, so you put things in those tweezers in a stochastic way. So there's a cloud of atoms that have been cooled down, not by cryogenics, but just by light. You shine light on them in a way that they kind of lose their energy to the light.
Yeah.
They cool down, they get slow, right? And then when you pierce them with those tweezers, sometimes they will meet one of those tweezers and they're gonna go in. Sometimes they won't meet that and then that thing will remain empty. Sometimes more than one will go in, but they are gonna collide and fly away. So it's 0 or 1, which means that we need to generate redundancy, so create more tweezers to pick up more atoms, and then we need to coordinate them in the process that we call sorting, which means taking from that those redundant points and placing them in an organized array that looks like a processor, let's say a square lattice, right?
Sure, yeah. Or whatever operation you're talking about, you can like customize the shape.
You can. So it depends on the modality of the quantum computer, right? So when you're talking about what is called gate-based quantum computing, usually that will go down to a square lattice that we are going to flexibly operate on as the calculation happens. So I think that the advantage of this neutral atom tech is exactly that we have system sizes that are kind of operating publicly in the hundreds, in private labs, for example, in the Harvard labs from our friends, close collaborators, they already get thousands, right? At the same time, we have gate fidelity, so the control of the systems are on par with pretty much all the others. So the fidelities are super high, and we have this ability to kind of move these atoms in free space, usually in a 2D plane, in a way that I can generate connectivities arbitrarily. And that is like a huge gain in not wasting our quantum coherence. That is not a limited commodity. That is a limited commodity. Sorry.
Yeah.
And now, when you take all of that, there is one extra element that comes in that's very important, which is parallelization of controls. Okay, so an example here, and it's just anecdotal, right? So there's no judgment of value, but usually when you Google for quantum computer, what you see on Google? What's the first
upside down pyramid?
The pyramid, right? Like that looks like a chandelier.
Yeah.
I always say that it's
chandelier.
Yeah. Some people say like chandelier. I actually like to call it the predator, because what catches my eye is not the color and it's the hairs coming out of it. Right? Like it cables and cables, right? So for us, you can parallelize control over multiple atoms with just one laser beam. You just take one laser beam and then you shine it, you flash it in the plane of the atoms. You put if there's atoms that you don't want to operate, you leave them far. If there's like a 10, 20, 50 atoms that you want to operate on, you bring them in and you shine on the light one laser beam on all of them and then move them back. So it's one laser beam, and that laser beam is gonna have plus moving maybe 4 or 5 controllers. Doesn't matter if it's 10 atoms or if it's 100 atoms. So this high parallelizability of the controllers make operation easy and make scalability easy. So I would say that these are some of the key features of neutral atom tech that makes this so exciting for me and for so many other people.
It sounds very promising. A couple of simple questions. One, a question that I get from my friends that aren't physicists and my extended family is like, how long until quantum supremacy, and are quantum computers going to break the internet?
Break the internet. I'm not sure what that means.
Well, it's going to break security protocols, and then we just won't have commerce anymore.
On the security protocols, we are lucky, or not lucky, but we are far-sighted enough that NIST and many collaborators across the world really have created new models, new methods for encryption that are quantum resistant. They do have some challenges in being kind of heavier to process than the standard encryption, like elliptic curve encryptions that we have today, or RSA. But they are resistant to quantum attacks, and they also have the other challenge of not having been tested by for so many years to ensure that they are as resistant as we expect them to be as per math. But I have no reason to doubt their power and their capacity. So I think that I'm not very scared about that. Of course, that there is some specific type of data that is encrypted and has been saved for a long time, and then people might decrypt that, and I don't know for which uses. Some uses might be bad, some uses might be good, right? There is a lot of criminal activity that happens even in the internet that if you are able to break down, that would be quite advantageous for society.
That makes sense.
So breaking the internet is not necessarily a bad thing, but there is no really breaking the internet, right?
Yeah,
so there's much more subtlety. There's much more subtlety to it. Now, when that's going to happen, I think that no one has a crystal ball. DARPA has this big program, the Quantum Benchmarking Initiative, which is being challenging companies to create roadmaps or validate roadmaps for what has been called a utility scale quantum computer by 2033. And it's an interesting initiative to ensure that the different vendors and different companies that are working on this technology have a well thought plan for what they would have to do that by 2033, and prototype along the way and see if they can get there.
Okay.
But it's not obvious that this is the timeline, and what utility scale means will vary. Right? The thing that they like to say is basically value minus cost, which is sometimes a little bit also limited as a way of defining utility, right? Because there's some things that are very useful. They go beyond their value go beyond the money. Right? The money goes beyond the price.
Makes sense. Do you have any advice for, say, someone that's maybe finishing their PhD or finishing their master's, maybe even finishing, I don't know if you can get a fancy job like this with just a bachelor's in physics, but maybe, I don't know. Do you have any advice for someone who's trying to get into quantum computing or quantum technologies?
So I think that should not let challenges kind of discourage you, right? Quantum industry is a research-heavy space, and doing a PhD is basically, the unifying feature of all PhDs of all fields in all universities of the world is that you're being trained to do research. You're being trained to innovate. It doesn't matter how many papers you have to publish, how many people are going to be in your board. The unifying feature is that you don't graduate unless you innovate. So that's what you're being trained for. Since quantum computing is a space that is so heavily in need of innovation, it's not surprising that there are so many PhDs coming in. So there is an imbalance, and actually I have data on this, that there is an imbalance on the number of entry points for kind of a lower levels on the degree ladder.
Almost like there's too many masters and bachelor's physicists and not enough jobs, but there's not enough PhD physicists for the jobs.
The specialization is not always necessarily the one that you need.
Okay,
right.
Yeah.
So just because you have PhD doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to join. But the point is, you should not let that discourage you. Right. It's a matter of finding the path. Looking for flexibility, right? Like I have many colleagues that were trained in undergraduate just as a bachelor's in physics or computer science, and they found ways into quantum companies, working in program management, in government relations, and in places where science communication was the key aspect, right? They are able to learn how our tech operates and help us develop relations with external parties that are of strategic interest and manage those relations in a way that absolutely leverages and requires them to know what they are doing, and also requires them to know how to lead those conversations and lead those interactions. There are also some people that succeed at finding technical positions in this way, I think that the main asset that you have in your favor for succeeding at finding these trajectories is your network. It's meeting people, right? And understanding who are your supporters and who are they connected with. Like I work in undergrad with Professor X. I don't know. Professor X might have a connection with company Y, right? So your chances of finding a path to engage with company Y are going to be higher than if it was with company Z, right?
So be flexible, be persistent, and almost the most important one is be outgoing.
Well, I mean, you can't. If I said just be outgoing, that would be, some people are introverts and maybe they would feel discouraged, and I don't think that that's the point, right?
Okay.
I think that it's not just being outgoing, but understand the network that you have and how you want to personally build your network, how you feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
But be strategic about it, about your network, right? So it doesn't matter if your network is small or big. It doesn't matter if you're outgoing or introvert. The question is, how strategic are you with how you leverage that network and how you are open with them, right? Like even if you're an introvert, humans are a social being, right? So we have the people that are closer to us, and then it's important to see how we can be open to them, with our needs, our goals, our for helping. Really, like it's good to have people around us to support.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So last question, is there anything about QuEra or yourself or just kind of physics and quantum mechanics, the state of quantum computing in general, that you think we haven't covered, or that, well, I mean, obviously we haven't covered a lot, but that you think is worth mentioning?
I think that a big question really is how quantum computing will relate with the national priorities of the different countries, and how they will affect geopolitically those countries. And I think that it's a very complex field that we have right now, with competing poles in North America, in Europe, in Asia, and we live in a world nowadays that tensions are a little higher than we would have liked.
Like there's almost a new space race, but quantum race.
Yeah, to some degree, right? I think that quantum still plays a small role in that, to be honest. I mean, there are other technologies that still have like a much more attention, but quantum being so hard to get, and it might yet become a reason to create boundaries and borders rather than creating bridges. And the problem is so hard that we need all the bridges that we can find, right? Like we don't yet know, the world doesn't yet know what's going to be the impact of quantum computing or quantum sensing or quantum networking, for that matter. That's in part some of the excitement of it, right?
Like we need quantum globalization.
maybe, yeah, perhaps a little bit of that. I think that this openness is important. Quantum technologies is one of the most aspirational value propositions that we have in technology nowadays. And even if we don't know what it is going to be used for exactly, I think that succeeding on delivering this technology will impact future generations, right? So I think that ensuring that the way that, since this will impact future generations, we have some responsibility with how how they will receive this, right? And ensuring that our conversations develop trust among different parties, entities, countries, cultures, societies. I think it's very important. That's perhaps the takeaway, the final takeaway I have. It's not very easily actionable, but I think that it's an important message.
Okay. Well, that's a good message to end up on. Again, this is Pedro Lopes. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly.
You got it.
QuEra. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly.
You also got it.
correctly. Yeah. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you very much. Thanks all.